A billionaire was rescued from the woods by a single mother. However, they were both moved to tears by his whisper. As dusk fell, lighting up the trees with a gentle amber light, the forest hummed with a calm, quiet breath. Their boots crunched over fallen leaves as Angela, a single mother in her early 30s, strolled hand in hand with her son Nico, who held her hand securely. The air was dense with the aroma of moss and damp dirt. Their post-school strolls served as a tranquil routine, a refuge from the bustle of the outside world. With his energy restored from a hard day, Nico sprinted forward, his rucksack jiggling with each stride. "Mama, look!" he shouted out, gesturing at a gnarled root that jutted out from the earth like a dragon's back. He stumbled on his way to it before she had a chance to react. His yell was piercing as he fell to the floor. Angela hurried over to him and asked, "Are you okay, baby?" Just as he was about to respond, a noise broke the silence. A hushed, urgent voice, scarcely audible above a whisper. "I would like some water, perhaps." At that moment, Angela did not move. A quick scan of her surroundings was completed, completely alone. All that can be heard are the leaves rustling and Nico's terrified, wide eyes. After she inquired, "You heard that too?" He gave a subtle nod. At the spot where Nico had fallen, she bent down and brushed away the dirt and leaves. A chilly metallic object felt by her fingertips. Concealed among the roots was a tiny, corroded vent. "Hello," she greeted. First silence, then a low moan. The intuition of Angela began to work. Quickly removing the top from the tiny water bottle she had been carrying, she proceeded to pour a stream of water through the grate. The sound of someone gasping between gulps of water sounded from below. "They will rescue you," she assured. Her hands were the only tools she had, so she started digging. Her hands were rough and her nails were chipped. Standing silently beside Nico offered her a staff as support. Gradually, the ground crumbled, exposing a rusted hatch. As she tugged with all her might, Angela wedged her fingers beneath it. Sounds of creaking were audible. After that, it swung open with the last wrench. A burst of celebratory heated air rushed forth. As she glanced inside, she coughed and fought back tears. A guy lay there, barely awake, with ripped clothing and pallid mud and blood-streaked skin. With a groan, he sank back after attempting to move. Without hesitation, Angela lowered herself to the ground. She asked for her hand. "Join me and I'll show you." She grabbed his arm, braced herself, and pushed him forward with all her strength, even though he barely managed to lift it. After emerging from the hole, he was scarcely able to breathe, as if he were a reincarnated ghost. He was brought to the floor by Angela. He bit his lip. She drew nearer her ears, picking up the sharp sound of his breathing. "I was a family man once," he remarked. His head swiveled to one side as sleep overtook him. "But the one I trusted most buried me alive." Angela tenderly cupped his neck with her fingertips. Though he was still alive, his vitality was dwindling. After retrieving her phone from her pocket, she bundled him in Nico's rain poncho. There is no signal. Her gaze shifted to Nico. "He's going home with us." The lad hesitated nodwise. Everything had changed at this moment, Angela knew. Whoever he was, she had no idea what had driven him to this place of buried roots and quiet, but he had murmured words of anguish that only the truth could carry. As the wind fluttered through the trees above Angela's little house, the outbuilding behind it squeaked with each step. It offered the sole building at a sufficient distance from the road and neighbors to provide genuine seclusion. For years, she had put it to rest. Tools, paint cans, and Nico's outgrown bike were formerly stored within. A man the world thought was dead was wrapped in old blankets, pallid and broken on a makeshift cot. Now it contained something else completely. The chilly night air made Angela gasp as she stood in the doorway. Returning her gaze to the house, she could see Nico dozing off. His chamber was illuminated by a gentle nightlight. She had kissed his forehead and said, "Mama's just checking the garden." He had rolled over, still dreaming, before she sneaked out. She placed the little lamp she had been carrying on her lap inside the shed. The sweeping shadows thrown by its golden light over the wooden walls exposed shelves stocked with long-lost jars and gardening implements. She finally looked across at the man she had chosen to call Leo, a name that would make him feel more tangible in the eerie stillness. Sweat beaded up on his hot cheeks. Under all the blankets she had draped over him, he quivered, and his voice quivered with fever when he roused. The treachery of Clemens Verena. Like specters exiting a tomb, the name easily slid from his mouth. At his side, Angela bowed low. His wrist was touched by her. He dreamed of a fever and an irregular heartbeat. Immediately she recognized the telling signals. Her hands did the rest, collecting linens and making herbal concoctions. She retrieved dried leaves, yarrow for infection, willow bark for discomfort, and elderflower to bring down the fever from a wooden box she had concealed beneath the sink. Like she had done in the latter months of her husband Thomas's life, she brought the mixture to a boil on the portable burner and stirred it. She found solace in movement, even if the recollection ached. Leo was given a small amount of cold tea by her. After an initial flinch, he proceeded to drink voraciously, making noises as he swallowed. A gentle "easy" escaped her lips. His previous mumbled words, "not too fast," were incomprehensible to her. Whispering as she brushed the wet hair off his forehead, she said, "I don't know who Clemens is, but you're safe now." Leo's hands quivered with dirt caked beneath his fingernails. His face was sunken with sharp cheekbones visible through pale skin. Red abrasions around his wrists indicated the site of former restraints. Angela had witnessed enough to know that this man had been confined, not hurt, by chance. Who was responsible for this, and why? Later that night she came back with potent soup. His speech was non-existent, but his eyes were wide and clearer than before. They locked with Angela's, silent and betraying a mix of gratitude, exhaustion, and disbelief. The meal was simple broth, carrots, and a few noodles. He was still too weak to eat on his own, so she sat down next to him and spoon-fed him. She told him not to speak but to become strong, because that is what is really important. As she stood outside, the wind grew stronger, and a branch tapped on the shed window as if to warn her. She felt the weight of her actions crush her as she glanced around, remembering the names Clemens and Verena that her son had whispered. Were they his relatives, acquaintances, or foes? After returning to the house to see how Nico was doing, she crept back into the shed. She spent the majority of the night curled up in a chair, sleeping with one eye open. Leo woke up again at one point, his voice quivering as he whispered, "They think I'm dead." Angela glanced at him, stunned, asking, "Who?" His lids drooped just far enough to lock with hers. He retreated to sleep after saying, "The ones I trusted." Angela sat in quiet afterward, her bones aching from the impact of his words. This was no random occurrence in the wilderness. Someone had plotted this man's disappearance and was doing everything in their power to keep the truth hidden. Leo woke up for the first time in an hour as Angela, who had just finished applying a warm compress to his bruised forehead, stood motionless. Her breath caught in her chest, while his cracked, dry lips parted slightly under the gentle yellow light of the oil lamp in the shed. Angela slid a broken ceramic cup to his lips and tilted it gently. He sipped, slowly, coughed, then took another drink. His body was weak and quivering from effort, but he didn't resist. "Water?" He rasped the word, barely audible but clearly conscious. Without hesitation, she slipped her arm around his back and carefully helped him sit up. His previously hazy eyes began to focus on Angela's face as she said, "You're safe." The water appeared to give him a brief moment of clarity as he scanned his surroundings. It took a while for the words to reach Leo, and he blinked slowly. "You're with me now. I found you in the woods. You were buried. You remember?" With a little tremble in his neck, he nodded, his gaze still clouded by anguish. "I should be dead," he murmured. When Angela heard the news, she choked. Leo reclined against the stack of worn-out blankets she'd set up behind him and said, "Tell me what happened, only if you can." Despite his short breathing and erratic speech, his recollections were razor-sharp, piercing through the fog like shattered glass. "Before anything else, I was a chief executive officer," he started. "Healthcare system advancements. We collaborated with organizations, created clinics in underserved regions, and subsidized medicine. I really believed we were making a difference." With her hands clasped in her lap, Angela remained still while she listened. "Verena, my wife, was the embodiment of my every desire. Smart, passionate, and elegant. Clemens, my best buddy, was the chief financial officer. Like a brother, I put my faith in him. The accounting and numbers were within his purview. We were completely transparent. In my mind, at least." He hesitated, a mixture of sadness and shock seen in the twitching corners of his mouth. "All night long. I left a board meeting early and returned home early. Quietness filled the house. As I made my way upstairs, I could hear them. Whispers, laughter. Clemens and my wife became intimate. It was hard for me to believe. There was absolutely no room for doubt as I stepped inside. A knot formed in Angela's chest. His betrayal was visibly fresh in his eyes, as she could see. It was acknowledged. Indeed, they were forthright about everything. For months they had plotted this. The estate should be completely under Verena's authority. Clemens desired the firm. Despite my best efforts, they had already hidden millions of dollars in offshore accounts, used phony contracts, and forged signatures. Leo got down on one knee. He was visibly shaken. A threat to expose them was made by me. "The board and the police will be notified," I informed them. "Clemens," he freaked out, but I was enraged. At the foot of the hearth rested a poker. It snatched him. Leo reached over and touched the grazed flesh just below his hairline as his fingers curved to the side of his skull. It was a swing. None of it registered with me. Just a moment before nightfall. Unaware that she had been suppressing her breath, Angela released it. To my surprise, I woke up underground, a little dark metal container. I had my hands restrained. Adequate air flowed through a vent pipe. They assumed I had passed away. I was buried alive. As if the guilt were his to bear, he averted his gaze and his voice wavered. Everything was staged, taking a break, a vacation. I went off the grid to write my book, and Verena informed the press that I needed time. She was believed by everyone. Naturally, they would. Angela extended her hand to take his. It was chilly. She slipped her fingers into his, but he remained unmoved. According to him, though, it wasn't only the treachery. As he whispered softly, it was the part I was unable to express. Glistening in his eyes, he shifted his gaze to her. "My son's name is Jonathan. His age is 12. I assured him that night that I would be home in time for supper. A model rocket was supposed to be our next project. No one ever saw me return home." I was unable to inform him. Leo lost some of his voice. His cheeks flushed with emotion. I was unable to express my affection for him. Without words, Angela clutched his hand. Whispering, he said, "That thought was the only thing that kept me alive." As I lay in the dark, bound and bleeding, I recalled his laughter and faith. Leo looked up at the lamp, the glimmer of its light reflecting off of his wet eyelashes. "And then I heard you," he murmured. You heard me." I kept whispering his name, hoping he wouldn't forget me. "My eyes are watering now too, Angela, and I'm not leaving you." So I nodded, and that was all. Amidst the weathered tools and musty smell of rain-soaked dirt in that dimly lit shed, a man whose life had been shattered by treachery started to rise again, propelled not only by the hands that had found him, but also by the love he had carried with him from the shadows into the dining room where the atmosphere between Angela and Leo had transformed. Her invisible wall started to crumble the night he told her his story. She stopped running away from the shed and stopped shrinking at the haunted expression in his eyes. Instead, she started bringing fresh soup every evening, extra blankets, and clean clothes. Her generosity no longer felt like a duty. It felt like a connection. As Angela was busy folding laundry in the living room one afternoon, Nico hurried in from the backyard, his face betraying his concern. "Mama, my fire truck's wheel came off again." Angela was about to respond, but Leo burst into the room behind Nico, his steps deliberate but sure. He bent down to examine the toy, asking, "Do you mind if I take a look?" Nico glanced at his mom as Leo softly inquired, and Angela nodded in agreement. Carefully turning the toy over, Leo adjusted the axle and, using an old screwdriver from the kitchen drawer, clicked the wheel back into place. Nico beamed and chirped, "Thanks, Uncle Leo." Angela stood motionless for a moment, thinking, "Uncle Leo, it came out so naturally." That night, after putting Nico to bed, Angela went to the kitchen to make tea. She paused in the hallway on her way back to the living room and saw Nico's old ripped jacket on the sewing table. She had planned to throw it away, but now the rip was gone and the stitches were clean and nearly invisible. Carefully, she turned around and saw Leo sitting by the window holding a mug of tea. "You sewed his jacket," she whispered. "I used to sew a lot when I was young," Leo said, raising his eyes to the ceiling. "What did my mom teach me? I didn't want it taken away from him." He shrugged. "I think we can still work things out," Angela murmured as she sat down next to him. A comfortable silence fell between them until she broke it, saying, "He likes you, you know." Leo stared down into his cup. "I see a lot of my son in him, not in his appearance, but in his enthusiastic speech." Angela sat at the table with Leo after Nico went to bed, her heart hurting in a manner she hadn't felt in years. Nico giggled through school stories while Leo listened intently and even smiled. The dinner that night was chicken stew and toast. She whispered, "Thank you," and Leo glanced up at her. "For what?" he said. The dishes remained undisturbed. "Why are you here? Just for the sake of trying?" In the interest of caring, Angela paused before speaking softly. "My husband, he had cancer. It happened so fast. 6 months from the first symptom to the last breath. I cared for him every day." Leo's voice sank. "You were the only one who cared for me. Helped him with everything from washing to feeding to holding his hand when the pain became too much." Leo stared at Angela silently as she continued. "But he never had to face the end alone. And I promised myself no one else should either." Her eyes glistened as she said, "I know what it feels like to lose someone, and what it means to be there when it matters most." In that moment, Leo spoke up. "That's why I stayed with you instead of abandoning you in that hole, Leo. I wanted to make sure you understood." "I would have died in that hole if you hadn't listened," Leo said, his voice barely audible over a whisper, as he reached across the table to touch Angela's hand. Something started to blossom. Not love quite yet, but something equally rare, the knowledge that two shattered hearts might still beat in rhythm. Leo's feet were steadier now because you wanted to dwell in that silent place between shared sorrows and unsaid dreams. Angela had brought in an old corkboard where Leo pinned papers, receipts, and sketches of timelines. On the desk, his weathered personal notebook lay open, its pages filled with scribbles, names, and passwords he had forced himself to remember. Weeks had passed since she had pulled him from that grave, and every day his body remembered what it meant to live. But more than that, his mind had begun to sharpen again. The shed, which had once been a place of recovery, now resembled a command center. The sweat of fevered nights had blurred some of them, but they were still legible and useful. He spent hours reliving his last days, the gala, where he first overheard Clemens whispering to Verena the business trip they had insisted he take alone, and the unexpected medical retreat they had gifted him. Fragments of the final argument resurfaced, including Verena's strange and cold eyes and Clemens yelling something about Leo never understanding loyalty. Then came the knockout punch. Standing in the corner, Angela knew just when to step in and provide a hand, and today she leaned over his shoulder as Leo rummaged through old bank paperwork he had retrieved using a password that had survived from an earlier account. "These are transfers I never approved," he whispered. "I had no say in the acquisition of these shell companies, and Angela gave me her stamp of approval. You said that Daniel Heller had worked with private accounts at Nord Bank, and Leo's expression brightened. We had faith in him. Last night I discovered him on LinkedIn and messaged him using a burner profile. If he responds, we'll know if he's still on your side." After what seemed like an eternity, they finally got confirmation. Daniel didn't probe too much, but he did ask, "Leo, if this is really you, tell me the name of the dog you rescued from the rooftop flood in 2012, which Leo answered confidently. "You said he looked like a wet loaf of bread," Leo continued. There was a moment of quiet, and then Daniel's voice quivered with fear. "My God, they said you died." Leo recounted the details in a concise and meticulous manner. There was no drama, just facts. Daniel, who was both shaken and loyal, agreed to lend a hand. The first revelation was shocking. 12 of Leo's dormant private accounts had been drained over the course of 3 months, with all the money going through a complex network of offshore accounts in a web of Cayman, Gibraltar, and Dubai. The authorization forms for those actions had Leo's name. Precisely. Daniel grimaced and remarked, "They digitally replicated your hand, probably from your legal documents." The culprits hid their tracks. However, Leo finally revealed, "We have one." He and Angela copied out all the statements. Leo was not yet prepared to strike. He wanted all the pieces, every lie, and to confront them not with suspicion, but with absolute evidence. So they set a trap. Angela helped him install a call recorder on an old burner phone. The inconsistencies and dates that didn't match with Leo's disappearance were pointed out. One signature was dated 2 weeks after Leo had been buried. That was proof enough. The perpetrators assumed the role of a foreign bank compliance officer and contacted Leo's former assistant, posing as someone seeking Leo's signature on a new trust document. Anne fell for the trap and responded with some trepidation. "I mean, it's all on file. Mr. Fallenstein had always authorized such matters, so I have all the necessary documents." "I handled the notarized documents myself," Leo said with a low, steady voice. "They buried me alive, Angela. Now I'll dig up every one of their secrets until they bury themselves." Angela reached for his shoulder and placed her warm hand on top of his, firmly grounding him. "You're not alone anymore, Leo," she whispered. "I know." He set his gaze fixed on the corkboard. "And that's what gives me strength. This time I'm not just surviving. I'm going to win." The shed had transformed into Leo's war room. His plan had come to fruition with surgical precision, concealed behind an encrypted alias. With a deep voice filter, he reintroduced himself to the legal world, but this time he was hiding as Mr. Adler, a reclusive European investor seeking to redirect assets through reputable legal companies. Emil Wagner, the lawyer who had previously managed Leo's estate and was now in the handy position of managing the monies that Verena and Clemens had stolen, was his target. They met in a chic Zurich leased office. Emil blinked and said, "Mr. Adler," standing up to greet Leo, who was now wearing neutral professional attire and had his graying beard lightly trimmed. Leo nodded, but continued to wear his spectacles. I've heard good things about your firm, especially your discretion when it comes to unconventional assets. Emil smiled politely. The lawyer's framed portrait of Verena smiling and still using Leo's name caught Leo's eye as he handed over the bogus paperwork that Angela had helped him construct. In the weeks that followed, Leo utilized this identity to get important facts. While Emil thought he was dealing with another rich client, Angela was quietly carrying out her role as he confirmed the establishment of several offshore companies linked to his estate by posing as a partner or benefactor. Little did Emil know that he was actually feeding classified information back to the man from whom they had stolen. Posting cryptic messages on niche financial forums under a newly created anonymous account, she whispered rumors, "Fallenstein may not be dead." Some of the posts were deleted, but screenshots continued to circulate. Within a week, the rumors reached Verena and Clemens, who panicked. Angela intercepted an email from Vina to Clemens saying, "Have you heard he's not dead? I don't know how, but someone knows." The time to bury this was now, but it was too late. Leo had collected everything imaginable: bank statements, correspondence, audio recordings from Georg, the driver who had secretly recorded Verena and Clemens plotting just weeks before Leo vanished fake signatures on financial statements and even a trove of internal emails that his former assistant Anne had hidden out of guilt. The last touch was the location. Leo penned a single invitation that was printed on classy cream stationery with the Fallenstein Foundation's emblem. "We are pleased to extend an invitation to you to a private charity banquet honoring Leopold Fallenstein, commemorating his life and the positive influence he had on humanitarian causes." The event was to take place in the very conference room where Clemens and Verena had once sat laughing as they signed away his life with his signature. On the night of the event, the room was decorated with candles and flowers, and a gentle string quartet played softly in the background. Angela stood quietly in the back, her gaze fixed on the front stage. Clemens arrived first, looking dapper in his navy tuxedo.